Chris Paul is one of the greatest players of his generation. He is a point guard in every sense of the word. Entering the league as a 6-foot point guard drafted to New Orleans, Paul has been a premier point guard in the NBA at every turn. From winning Rookie of the Year on the back of 16-8, to staking a claim for the Most Valuable Player award at 22 years old, on the back of 23-12 and all defensive honours. The individual accolades are up there with the best for one of the greatest point guards of all time. But one certain aspect of Chris Paul's game in 2020 is better than it has ever been before. Following a tenure at the Clippers that saw Paul become the most famed Clipper of all time, the star was traded to the Rockets in return for a host of players that have been fantastic for the Clippers, the likes of Lou Will, Montrezl Harrell, and Patrick Beverley, with the 32-year-old Paul going to an offense that already had a ball-dominant guard in James Harden. There were several questions about how the two would cope, and if the Rockets had given up too much for an injury-prone, aging star whose primary position was the same position their franchise player had already occupied. Despite the question marks over how two ball-dominant players in James Harden and Chris Paul would coexist, the Rockets had an incredible season, finishing with 65 wins as Paul averaged 18.5 points, 8 assists, and a characteristically good amount of steals. And contrary to the false narrative that some people had formed, suggesting that Paul is not a great playoff player, CP3 elevated his great regular season in the playoffs, averaging over 20 points per game to go along with a touch under 6 rebounds and 6 assists. Now, the 2017-18 NBA season would go down as one of the biggest what-ifs in recent NBA history, with the Rockets up 3-2 before a hamstring injury kept CP3 sidelined for the final 2 games, leading to the Warriors winning the series in 7 and going on to win the chip. The question would be begged to this day, what could have been had CP3 stayed healthy? Now let's fast forward to the offseason of 2019, which saw an aging Chris Paul traded yet again. It was deja vu for CP3. However, this time he had been traded from a contender to a team that was supposedly in the beginning stages of a rebuild, following the trades of their 2 star players in Paul George and Russell Westbrook. After the Thunder had acquired CP3, everyone had written them off. It was seen as though the Thunder would look to offload him as soon as possible because many believed he was well past his best and he was of no use to a team that had just received young talent in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a host of picks to kickstart a rebuild. However, the Thunder would not cave into the numerous people in the media suggesting that Paul should be traded before he stepped foot on the court, and that his albatross of a contract would be detrimental towards the Thunder's hopes of rebuilding their franchise. And how wrong these people were. With the NBA set to resume in just over a month, the Thunder currently sit at 40-24 and have a ridiculous record of 34-14 since Thanksgiving, only behind the 2 finals favourites from each respective conferences, the Lakers and Bucks. So how is a team that lost their 2 best players in return for a host of picks, a young up-and-coming star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and a point guard that apparently holds the worst contract in the NBA on his last legs, become one of the NBA's best teams? Following a poor start to the season in which the Thunder and the several new players had troubles acclimating to their new environment, the Thunder eventually found their groove, like I mentioned previously, and have since had a record of 34-14 following Thanksgiving, which has them at 3rd in the NBA. In that time period, only 4 teams are top 10 in the NBA in both offensive rating and defensive rating. Now, who would those teams be? The best team in the league, the Milwaukee Bucks, of course. No, you would be incorrect if you thought one of those teams were the Bucks, because they sit 11th in offensive rating. The 4 teams that occupy a top 10 spot on the offensive side and defensive side of the floor are the Boston Celtics, the LA Lakers, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of those 4 teams, the 2 LA sides are seen as 2 of the 3 teams most favoured to win the championship. The Boston Celtics sit 3rd in the Eastern Conference and are considered one of the best teams in the league. And then it's the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that was supposed to be at the bottom of the league. A team that defied the odds to find themselves in elite company 8 games out from the 2020 playoffs. So how is a team that was supposed to be in the early stages of rebuilding found themselves in the company of 3 teams that are all looking to contend and are likely to contend once the playoffs roll around? What is most impressive about this Thunder team is that every player has a clear and defined role. So often on teams that are towards the top of the league, there can be numerous players that want the ball in their hands, numerous players that are not as intent on working defensively as they should, and these frailties are always exposed come playoff time. OKC, however, have assembled a roster that has the right combination of scoring and playmaking punch, particularly in the form of the three-headed monster of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Dennis Schroeder, and of course Chris Paul, who are outscoring teams at an astonishing rate of 28.6 points per 100 possessions when on the floor together. In addition to this scoring punch coming from the three guards, Danilo Gallinari continues to perform at a sub-all-star level, providing the team with 19 points and the incredibly important ability to space the floor, which he has done to perfection throughout the entire season, shooting 40% from 3 on over 7 attempts per game, which has him among the league's elite in terms of shooting. Like I mentioned, amongst the recognizable players that have been credited for a lot of the Thunder's success, there are numerous players that are pivotal to the Thunder's success because of their ability to play their role. One of those players that plays his role to a T is the undrafted guard out of Arizona State, Lu Dort. 6'3", 215 pounds, Dort is built like a linebacker, but still has the ability to move laterally terrifically, which is why he is so effective guarding the opposition's best guard on so many occasions. Watch Dort pick up Dame at half court before disregarding every screen that Whiteside tried getting him with and eventually receiving an offensive foul because of his ability to get to his spot before Dame can generate enough force to get by him. On this other occasion, you can see Dort recognizes that Towns is in a high percentage position in the post, so he comes in from the blind side and rips the ball out of the much bigger Towns' grasp, showing off his strength as a smaller guard. Dort is someone that exemplifies what the Thunder are like on defense. Tenacious, aggressive, and always playing with a high motor. There are several other players on the team that provide impact on defense, such as Terrence Ferguson, who has struggled mightily on offense, but is statistically one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league, alongside the likes of Marcus Smart. Chris Paul remains excellent on defense and is incredibly important as a vocal leader, talking to all players and in particular the younger players about when to switch, hedge, and make the right moves defensively. Now, it is great to see that the Thunder and several of their players are engaged on defense and have a significant influence on the defensive identity that they have built throughout the season. But what is it that the Thunder, and in particular Chris Paul, do to separate themselves from every other team in the league? Quite simply, the Thunder are the most clutch team in the NBA. The Oklahoma City Thunder's ability to win games in the clutch, which is defined as a game that is separated by 5 points or less heading into the last 5 minutes of the game, is where the Thunder separate themselves from the rest of the NBA. The Thunder sit atop the NBA with a total of 29 wins in the clutch out of a possible 42 games, and the Thunder players recognize that. Chris Paul's clutch statistics are nothing short of phenomenal. He has scored more points in the clutch than anyone in the NBA throughout the entire season, and through the period in which the Thunder have recorded 24 of a possible 29 wins, Paul has scored 106 points on ridiculous shooting splits of 55.4 from the field, 40% from 3, and 93.3% from the line. CP3 is really out here playing with defenders like it's 2K come clutch time. And here's a prime example. January 8, 2020. Pure poetry in motion. Trailing for the majority of the game, heading into the fourth, Paul had only recorded 8 points through 3 quarters, on the road facing the Nets, but took complete control in the fourth quarter and overtime. The chemistry between CP3 and Steven Adams was crucial down the stretch. The cohesion between the two was evident, as CP3 began utilizing Steven Adams as a means of isolating himself against Jarrett Allen on multiple occasions, which was a nightmare for the Nets, as 7-foot Jarrett Allen stood no chance trying to guard one of the shiftiest players of all time, CP3. The combination of Chris Paul's craftiness and Adams' wide frame made for an ideal combination when forcing an isolation on the opponent's big. So following 8 points through 3 quarters, CP3 would finish the game with 28 and the Thunder would take home the win. Just one example of the work Paul has been able to do in the clutch throughout a historic season. Now, what do we all know about the NBA playoffs? The pace slows down and the intensity ramps up as top teams are battling each other with more on the line than the regular season. As a result, the games are often closer. Following the 8 games prior to the commencement of this year's playoffs, the Thunder will likely be matched up against one of the Jazz, Nuggets, or Rockets. All teams that hold very similar records and would more than likely result in close games all throughout the series. And this is where the excellence of CP3 will separate the Thunder come clutch time and result in the Thunder being more than a team that just surprised fans and analysts in the regular season, they will be a team that could really surprise some people come playoff time. The narrative surrounding the Thunder has shifted from a team looking to rebuild to a team that is competitive, but from what I've seen and heard, most people see them as just that. A feel-good team that will be competitive, but their combination of defense and offense, plus the added factor that they are the best team in the NBA when it comes to the clutch, are all the ingredients for a postseason run. Let's keep in mind this extended break is giving old man CP3 some time to rest up and come into the postseason as fresh as ever. So it's time we start seeing the OKC Thunder and CP3 is a bit more than just a feel-good story. They are going to be a team that can match the best come playoff time, and I certainly wouldn't want to be matched up against them, particularly with a rested CP3 having something to prove. Now, if you made it to the end of the video, I'm guessing you enjoyed it, so you might as well subscribe, because there will be more content on the way and you wouldn't want to miss that. But either way, have a good day.